In the past, the state of West Virginia has taken justifiable pride in its coal mining regulatory program. The program until recently was widely seen as one of the most successful in the eastern coal fields in protecting its natural resources from coal mining damage. While abuses did occur, they did not compare to the widespread destruction and lax enforcement in other states. However, with the creation of the Department of Energy in 1986, the West Virginia program began to deteriorate until it now stands as the worst regulatory program in any major coal state. The evidence of this systemic breakdown can be found in almost every aspect of the program. According to the Federal Office of Surface Mining, or OSM, West Virginia inspectors ignore 4 out of every 5 violations they observe on a mine site, allowing many thousands of violations to go uncorrected. The state has allowed its inspection force to decline until it now employs only half as many inspectors as required by its program. As a result of this decline in inspectors, the workload of the remaining inspectors has become far greater in West Virginia than any other major coal state. The lack of personnel to implement the law is not limited to just inspectors. Despite the major impacts of mining on the water resources in the state, West Virginia does not employ a single hydrologist. The civil penalty program is a disgrace. The state has collected only 3% of the nearly $14 million in fines which are owed the state, thus totally removing any incentive to obey the law. Over half of the major enforcement orders issued by the state are ignored by coal operators. Despite the lack of compliance, the state has not taken a single action against any corporate officers for failure to comply with an order. In stark contrast, last year alone, the state of Kentucky took action against corporate officers in over 500 instances. Nor does the state use other enforcement tools to compel compliance. In the last OSM evaluation period, the state did not take a single injunctive action, nor did it initiate a single criminal proceeding to compel compliance with the law. The state further abuses the law by allowing a mine site to remain unreclaimed for long periods of time. To avoid compelling an operator to reclaim a site, the state often declares a site to be temporarily inactive, thereby postponing reclamation of the site. Some of these determinations are legitimate. Many, if not most, are not. There are currently over 600 of these temporarily inactive sites in West Virginia, many of them temporarily inactive for 5 or 6 years. The breakdown in mining regulation in West Virginia has received increasing criticism. The General Accounting Office, the watchdog of Congress, has criticized the weak enforcement program of West Virginia. So too has the federal government, which is charged with overseeing state performance. It has also found the state's efforts severely lacking. Moreover, the press has been consistently critical of the breakdowns. To combat these documented problems, on September 16, 1988, a coalition of local, state, and national environmental and citizen organizations took the first step to initiate litigation in federal court against West Virginia. In addition, on September 30th, to determine the impacts of the failing enforcement program on the state's land and water, the Environmental Policy Institute sponsored an overflight of mine sites in West Virginia. The sites flown accurately and vividly portray the failures of the program and the resulting environmental damage. Outstanding violations of law exist in large numbers, but go uncited and uncorrected. Deficient permitting allows mining practices which are environmentally harmful. Sites with outstanding violations receive bond releases or are classified as inactive. This site represents many of the problems which have revealed the West Virginia regulatory program to be the worst in the nation. The site has many violations which are uncorrected and of which existed for substantial periods of time. First, there is a failure to return the land to its approximate original contour. There is also a failure to eliminate all high walls. There is a failure to adequately revegetate the site. Material has been illegally placed on the downslope, and 3 separate landslides are occurring. For over a year and a half, state inspectors were aware of these violations but took no action. According to state records, DOE Commissioner Kenneth R. Faber personally recommended that the site apply for an active status and then granted it, rather than requiring abatement of the violations. Soon after, the operator removed his equipment from the site and put it up for sale. Evidently, the company then defaulted and declared bankruptcy, leaving the site unreclaimed.
DOE uses other methods to avoid taking enforcement action and requiring reclamation. In certain cases, the Commissioner will personally intervene in absolving a company of its responsibility for a site by attempting to grant full or partial bond release to the operator despite the existence of major outstanding violations. For instance, according to officials, Commissioner Faber personally determined this site in compliance and attempted to bond release it over a field inspector's recommendation to the contrary. This site has numerous outstanding violations, including spoil placed on the downslope, the failure to eliminate high walls and to return the land to its approximate original contour, the failure to prevent and repair erosion gullies, and to establish an adequate vegetation cover, the failure to eliminate more high walls estimated at 70 to 100 feet high. What enforcement that does occur in West Virginia in the last few years typically occurs only as a result of prodding by OSM, the U.S. Congress, or the press. At this site, despite serious violations, the state took no enforcement action for an extended period of time. Starting in October 1986, OSM began pressuring the state to take action. Finally, a year later, the state issued the operator a notice of violation. Then, however, during the next 7 months, the state granted the operator 11 extensions of time to comply with the order. With even OSM's patience growing thin, the federal government finally issued the state a 10-day notice after the 11th extension. The state breakdown could not be more total. Among the many violations outstanding on this site are problems with sedimentation ponds, drainage structures, and spoil transportation. The improper release of bonds is a common occurrence in the state. This site was mined during the interim program and was required to eliminate all high walls and return the land to its approximate original contour. Despite failure to do so, the state nonetheless improperly granted partial bond release. The failure of the state to maintain a sound regulatory program has both short and long-term impacts in West Virginia. Perhaps the most long-lasting impact of the state's failures involve large mountaintop removal operations and the placement of spoil material from the top of the mountains in adjacent valleys and hollows. These large structures are known as fills and are among the largest man-made earthen structures in the United States. Just a few years ago, West Virginia was nationally recognized for its sound approach to the construction of these massive structures, the failure of which can be a catastrophe to the environment and to the people who live nearby. The state now routinely allows fills to be constructed by in-dumping. This is allowed under regulations, but only if 80% of the material is hard rock so as to ensure stability. To gain cost advantage, operators are now routinely in-dumping into fills material that is not 80% hard rock. Since all engineering fill calculations are premised on 80% hard rock, the stability of improperly constructed non-hard rock fills is unknown. As these tapes show, the improper in-dump fills are already showing major problems, such as on this site. Large tension cracks are already visible, indicating deep-seated movement in the spoil mass and potential for failure. This is another in-dump fill that is comprised of less than 80% hard rock. In close proximity to this operation is a residential community which is located at the base of the mountain. The operator is constructing another in-dump fill that is not made with 80% hard rock. Tension cracks are evident, showing vertical displacement of 10 to 12 feet. Additional cracks extend the crest of the fill, posing a high potential for failure and serious risks for the nearby community. In dozens of sites overflown by EPI, severe regulatory and environmental problems were found in almost all. The failure to enforce, the failure to issue proper permits, and the failure to properly release bonds is systemic in West Virginia and affects site after site. This operator has failed to reclaim the high wall, return the site to its approximate original contour, carry out concurrent reclamation with mining, establish an adequate revegetation cover, and achieve its post-mining land use. This site is plagued with erosion and by other violations such as inadequate revegetation and mine spoil being placed on the downslope. Among its numerous problems, this site has substantial segments of unreclaimed high walls, a failure to return the land to its approximate original contour, reclamation that is not concurrent with mining by several years, and revegetation, where it exists at all, is extremely poor. This site suffers from a myriad of problems, including inadequate sedimentation drainage, inadequate revegetation, and non-concurrent reclamation. Here the operator has placed organic material illegally on the downslope. The statewide failure to regulate is even impacting one of West Virginia's most treasured natural resources, the New River Gorge area. This site has plenty of problems, including the failure to control sedimentation, failure to repair gullies, and placing spoil on the downslope. Furthermore, this operation is located above the spectacular Gauley River, into which the site's water runoff drains. Another long-term impact of poor regulation involves the degrading effects of acid mine drainage, a situation that develops when surface and groundwater come in contact with toxic elements in the mining material. Acid mine drainage severely pollutes groundwater and streams, and the rivers and lakes that are ultimately fed by them. Acid drainage also causes fish kills, destroys wildlife habitats, creates livestock watering and crop irrigation problems, and defoliates watershed vegetation. Once an acid drainage problem is created, it is virtually impossible to stop, and therefore can perpetuate for decades. In most cases, the only answer to acid mine drainage is in permanent water control treatment systems, an abatement method which is almost always elaborate and extremely expensive to maintain throughout the lifetime of the problem. The West Virginia DOE has regularly failed to prevent acid mine drainage problems from occurring by granting deficient mining permits to operators who fail to demonstrate, as federal law requires, as to how acid drainage situations will be prevented. In addition, with regards to existing acid problems created in the past, DOE has regularly failed to adequately enforce against operators who are not properly treating the acid discharges. For instance, on this site, in 1987, the operator failed to properly handle normal stormwater runoff from nearby mine waste piles, forcing a large sedimentation pond to overflow its banks. This caused large quantities of highly acidic water to spill into the nearby stream. The acid load quickly traveled to the Tigert River a few miles away. This spill resulted in a massive fish kill in the Tigert, where hundreds, if not thousands, of fish were found dead. DOE inspections of the site made previous to this spill found no problem with the drainage systems. In 1988 on this site, yet another debilitating acid spill occurred into the river when the water control dike failed. In recent years, the Tigert River was known to be making a significant recovery from the impacts of acid problems of past decades. In the early 1980s, the river's resurgence were drawing scores of fishermen and outdoorsmen alike. These spills have set the river back at least 10 years. The West Virginia surface mining program has collapsed. OSM, while recognizing severe state problems, is unwilling to go any further. In an internal memo to his superiors regarding the deteriorating West Virginia program and the state's unwillingness to correct those problems, the OSM Field Office Director states, "We are at a loss as to how to proceed," end quote. The current acting OSM Director, Robert Gentili, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, has ignored the problem, asserting that the West Virginia program is on, quote, solid ground, end quote. Following EPI's overflight, on October 13, 1988, federal officials in secrecy overflew and videotaped the exact same sites that appeared in this film. As of November 1988, according to agency records, OSM took not a single enforcement action despite the existence of many violations. Either the state should commit itself to a complete overhaul of the program, or it should return the program to the federal government. The current situation is intolerable, illegal, and places the public and the environment at serious risk. It must not continue.